see you again. Now, over the next 20 to 25 minutes, we will be finding out how the pandemic has accelerated the move towards remote assessment and how technology is set to shape claims handling in the future. Now, it is a really important and exciting topic, and I'm delighted to welcome someone who knows all about this area. Vikash, it's good to see you. Now, I'm going to sit back for one moment because you're going to tell me and our online audience all about yourself and what it is that you do.
Thanks for having me, Juliet. My name is Vikas Sachdeva. I lead the advisory services practice for Quantify in our financial services and insurance domain. Juliet, I have spent many years driving digital transformation from within the organizations, within the insurance companies, as well as an advisor from outside in perspective for global insurance companies. And focusing on these digital transformation moments of truth, I have really engaged with these companies in understanding the ways they could improve the overall customer experience, drive the operational excellence and efficiency within the organizations, and find the new ways of operations in terms of operating models they need to adapt. I am dialing in here today from Greater Boston area. And in New England here, we are really looking forward to upcoming summer.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit as well, before we start our interview proper, so to speak, about Quantify itself? Because obviously there's a compatibility between what you do and your veterans experience and what Quantify does.
Yeah, absolutely. So Quantify is an applied AI and a data science company. We pride ourselves in solving complex problems within insurance domain by leveraging data, analytics, data science, capabilities, our cloud native technologies, as well as really focused on our cutting edge research in the AI and the ML space. And we will talk more about it in our conversation here today. Quantify is named as an InsurTech 100 company, and we were included in Forrester's Wave for computer vision as a leader in the computer vision consultancies for Q4 2020. So I'm looking forward to dive deep into this conversation here with you, Juliet, today, and talk about what we are seeing in the market space and how Quantify is helping our customers and clients.
Yeah, and it is absolutely fascinating because we heard that keynote presentation, which gave us a sense of some of the challenges and even the discussions beforehand. I mean, this really is an exciting time to be in the sector. So you're certainly very well positioned to actually work with a lot of companies because it is a bit scary out there. But it helps if you've got a good navigator leading the way. So from your perspective, Vikas, I mean, how did claims assessment and handling actually change in 2020? Because this was a monumental year.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And I heard the previous speaker also talk a lot about the COVID-19 and the pandemic and how that's really changing the human behavior. And at the same time, how the industry-wide, we are adopting the digital tools necessary to provide the better service. You and I have, of course, probably done a curbside pickup and have used our devices to really perform the claims-related activities. Where I would go with that one is what I heard CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, by the way, said in April 2020, 2 months into the pandemic, that we have already seen a transformation, digital transformation of worth 2 years in 2 months alone. So that's the kind of acceleration, technology tipping point that we are all seeing in the marketplace. There is also talking about the claims and the journeys across the entire value chain, how customers interact with insurers. There are very much a lot of moments of truth here where the digital can really help or digitization can really help. What I would say is in those moments, we need to look through, there's a notion, by the way, Juliet, let me just say it this way. There is a notion in the industry right now that claims, we always think about a repair and replace industry in the claim situation, where what we should think about really is the prevent and predict and prepare industry. meaning that we need to start thinking about customer journeys and be more proactive in those situations versus reactive. So my thought process always is even when I'm looking at the claim situation, it is to think about how we could look across the journey and think about how the best products could be introduced, how we could underwrite the better risk and how we could prevent those losses, how we could reserve better, how we could triage better. So I look through the entire customer journey there. So as we were talking about, of course, pandemic has changed our behaviors. And in those cases, what we have seen is that lack of resources, working remotely initially, as the previous speaker was talking about, and high volume of claims in certain sectors. All of that, if you could combine it, really needed a good quality automation, as well as remote assessments, chatbots, conversational AI, document AI, and all of those drones and techniques that really enable the automation of those claims better. And also the servicing better. Also the understanding of how we capture these claims movements and claims losses and the data associated with it faster. And ultimately that means we are providing a better and quality service to our claimants in the moment of their need. The other piece is also by estimating these claims better. And in fact, starting the assessment and the triaging of claims better initially and classifying them into the low touch and high touch claims, we could provide the better service ultimately to our claimants. And then we always forget about using all of these technologies, and that should be front and center of our minds, is how we could use this data to prevent the frauds to begin with. And by looking through that fraud detection, fraudulent claims, and preventing those claims upfront, if we put it all together, we could ultimately provide the better customer experience by leveraging these technologies. So those are the changes that we are seeing in the marketplace during COVID-19 pandemic in the last 12 months.
Which are effectively holistic. So you're really spearheading this, and it's bearing fruit. So given that, to what extent do you think that remote claims assessment is likely to become the norm, something that we all get used to?
So this is an interesting thing also, Juliet. We always talk about how we are adapting so fast in the pandemic, right? Our behaviors have adapted. The changes that took a lot of longer, now we adapted so fast. So the touchless claims service delivery fundamentally changes the overall customer interaction with the insurers, by the way. And even when we come back to normal, I don't think we are going to go back to pre-COVID days, by the way, as the previous speaker also talked about. What we are going to see a new normal, a new hybrid, where we have already adapted to these self-services, remote assessments, and leverage of these technologies in the operational excellence. If we look at it from that perspective, the new normal is going to look very different from the pre-COVID days. And that's where I'm going to see that industry is already changing. Let me give you a few other data points here that I look at. In last 1 year alone, by the way, Juliet, about 30 billion IoT devices were installed, Internet of Things. You and I, and several of us, there are about 1.8 billion digital assistants in our hand. I'm showing you my iPhone, by the way. So all of these technologies that are at our fingertips as policy holders, as claims adjusters, as the insurer companies, we could provide the better first-party claims losses as well as the better third-party low-touch situations also, both. The use of mobile apps, by the way, and insurers provided software and inventory creation is increasing. So let me give you another concrete example here. The increase of these devices, these softwares has increased 33% since 2018. So inventory list, if you prepare before a loss, as a claimant or a policyholder, you can get your claims approved and settled on an average 3.4 days faster than if you took that inventory after the loss. So the comparison point really here is having that work done beforehand could really automate the entire process and settlement much faster for you as a claimant and for insurer. We also saw, by the way, from remote assessment perspective, the Texas and Tennessee saw a lot of storms and tornadoes, right? And in those situations, because of the lockdowns, not claims adjusters could go to those places very rapidly and quickly because of the restraints that we have in place, restrictions we had in place. But in addition to that, by using the drones and computer imagery, you could actually do the remote assessment of those lost situations much better and much faster. So my perspective is we are going to see a very new normal, which is going to be a hybrid of what happened before COVID-19 and what we have done within the last 12 months or so. And that will be the new normal going forward.
And it's interesting as well, because within that answer, you also touched on the point about how these different technologies are being used.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if you could actually go into that in a little bit more detail and in the time available, because time is closing down on us, sadly, but also to give me an idea about the limitations of new technology. It's great on the one hand, but I'm sure that there are also restrictions built in as well.
Right. So we are seeing drones. The crop insurers are leveraging drones to assess the damage. We are seeing computer imagery really looking at the roof damages beforehand, at the time of loss, and afterwards. By comparing all of it, we could actually prevent the frauds situation there. We are seeing the IoT devices in the cars with telematics, understanding the driving behaviors. We are seeing the computer imagery, satellite imagery really helping assess the losses. So all of these techniques are really helping the overall claim situation much better, preventing the losses, and really driving the advanced analytics, right? And the data that we are collecting during the claims could actually help us better build products, as I mentioned initially. The same question that you're asking, Juliet, is around how the limitations of this technology are. We believe, by the way, that in certain sectors of insurance, up to 70% of the claims can be automated by leveraging those document AI capabilities, by using conversational AI, and by leveraging the drones and other computer vision and advanced analytics techniques. However, what we are noticing is that there are still 30% of the claims which require a high touch. And let me give you a few examples there. In certain situations where there was an accident and injury rates were very high, or in some situation, there was a death. In those situations, you do require human in the loop and providing the best servicing experience. And those are the high touch situations. But what happens is by automating those 70% of the claims, you are freeing up all those case adjusters to really provide the high touch service required for those 30% where the high touch is really required. And that improves the overall experience and the time that is available to handle those high touch claims. So to me, answer your question, Juliet, I don't think technology is the answer for all 100% automation. And I hope this highlights where the technology is not always the answer, where the high touch and human can still have to play in those games.
Sure, which is interesting because whenever we talk about technology, it is often presented as the silver bullet and something which is job threatening rather than job enhancing, certainly allowing people to, or certainly freeing people up so that they can do other things and actually be more productive elsewhere in the organizational chain. But how do you think that AI and machine learning will help handle these claims in real time? Because that's really the heart of it from the customer's perspective, isn't it?
Right. That's absolutely right. So I look at it from various different perspectives. The first topic that comes to mind is the conversational AI and the chatbots. So a claimant could actually file their claim much faster, leveraging conversational AI, provide the data much faster, the wait times gets reduced, the service is improved. So, and as far as you can use the first notice of loss, or FNOL that we like to call in the industry, we can file those much faster. We can also use, secondly, is the document AI and machine learning in processing those unstructured documents that come in as part of the claims and get the structured insights from it to drive the claims settlement much faster. So that is the second aspect of AI. The third is the computer vision. We already talked about damage and loss assessment situation and leveraging those video analytics that can drive the behavior better. And the fourth one is the fraud detection and prevention. By leveraging those machine learning algorithms, you could prevent the frauds and you could detect those faster. What in the industry thought leaders, when I talk within the industry, we are expecting more fraud, by the way, next 12 months. That is just because of the COVID-19 situation. So having a right digital toolkit, a right weapon in your arsenal here is going to help you prevent those frauds or detect those frauds early on, leveraging the AI and ML. And the last piece there is a lot of the claims data that we are capturing through these devices that I just talked about could actually help you build better products to begin with in the insurance. And that is the part that I keep coming back to, having the right products, underwriting appropriately, reserving appropriately, and taking the triage part much faster with automation of leveraging the AI and ML. So that's all comes together from these technologies.
Absolutely. And this is all happening in the background, out of sight, out of mind to your average claimant. So how does he or she benefit from this remote assessment?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So we all talk about operational excellence and cost savings for insurers, but we also need to keep in mind the claimants and their experience through remote assessment. The first one is the convenience to me, Juliet. The biggest advantage really is the remote claims assessment situations. Customer can choose the time of their convenience, and it can be done remotely without having somebody really visit their homes in this new normal. The second is the faster and better quality service. So when done well, these conversational bots and chat bots and AI can really help defend the agents really providing the quality answers very quickly, reduce the wait times, as I talked about earlier, and provide the better insights and recommendations when the real agent really comes into the picture, handling those discussions. So the better service ultimately is the second benefit. The third benefit that I see always is by having this operational cost really reduce and excellence that you really get, all those cost savings should be passed back to our policyholders in terms of premium reduction. So the side benefit or big benefit coming together in the end to me is the premium reduction by leveraging these automation and technologies. And those are all benefits. Yeah.
Absolutely, but it's often something which is missing from the conversation, isn't it? That if you make people more efficient, if claims are processed more quickly, it saves money. So you benefit in the long term because your policy next year is a little bit cheaper. But I mean, we hear a great deal about self-service damage assessment. So is that going to take off? And what are the benefits of that? Can you see it flying?
Yeah, so self-service assessment, and again, because we have all become used to this new digital ways of doing things and servicing anyways, that I see self-assessment also take off, right? There was a survey done last year when we asked all the policyholders how comfortable they are with self-assessment. And what we heard is during COVID-19, up to 25% of them said that they want contactless home inspections. They want a self-service damage assessment because they didn't want the case adjuster, home contractor, or anybody else walking into their homes in person. And therefore, they were looking for self-assessment technologies that now insurance companies have started to provide. They can do video calls to really talk with the claims inspector. They could actually use photos and upload that, and the insurers could actually convert that into 3D models for properties. And all of that self-assessment technologies at the fingertips. And what it really does, in another angle that we talked about, is the manual home inspections, by the way, on an average take about $500 for a 2,000 square feet home. All of that cost saving and the convenience could be again translated back in terms of a monetization and the premium reductions that I talked about before. So to me, I have no doubt in my mind that the self-service assessments, which are not ubiquitous yet, are going to continue to rise. And the benefits are going to be translated both for insurer as well as for policyholders.
Okay, let's stay with the idea of self-assessment or remote assessment, certainly. So what I want you to do, Vikash, is to take out your crystal ball and clear away the smoke. Okay, gaze deep into it and tell me what is next for remote assessment. This is an exclusive. We're going to get this prediction from you.
So I see that the technology adoption is going to continue to increase, and the transformation is going to continue to accelerate. Insurers are going to leverage all these technologies for automation and and the claimants and policyholders are becoming more digitally savvy. With all of that said, now the question really is, how do we achieve that, Juliet? We at Quantify love to break down complex problems into small chunks and components of simple processes. And we put a dollar value to each and every of those components, and we start to quantify those, and we start to monetize all of those efforts. So if you start to think about, if you take the loss that the settlement could be done in 2 days versus 5 days, that's a cost saving ultimately, and that can be passed on back to the claimants. But in addition to that, the one topic that I didn't talk about is the litigation. In the claim situation, we also want to reduce from insurance standpoint the cost of litigation. And by having all of these right models in place, we can start to mitigate those. The last is fraud detection and prevention. By saving all of those costs and having the right operational excellence, we can start to drive the overall cost down. So to me, we have to think about the entire value chain. I keep saying that all the claims data that we are capturing has to help us develop the better products, or build the better insurance products, have the better understanding of the risk that we are underwriting, and ultimately providing the best triage in the low touch to high touch situation. And the remote assessment and the self-assessment in isolation is not going to work, Juliet, to me. I think we need to look at through the entire customer journey, from the start of the customer purchasing the policy all the way in the terms of claims, that we don't want that to happen both from insurer side as well as claimant side. But that's the moment of truth when we can really differentiate and convert those claimants into a loyal customers for insurers for a very long time, and really, really improve our customer experience at the time of crisis, which is the claim situation.
And this is the point, isn't it? That if companies are actually going to follow your advice, that strategy which you're giving them, it is a win-win-win. And it's important to recognize as well the importance of brands. If you get it right, you get that customer loyalty. And it is a huge journey. You take the customer with you, and if they're happy, it becomes a word of mouth thing. They bring others on board.
Absolutely. And that's why the main differentiation to me is really around the claims experience. But you have to think holistically across customer life cycle and customer journey. And by stitching those points and moments of truth together, I hope we can increase the level of customer experience and drive the operational excellence and monetize every interaction that's at all possible.
But it's certainly something which you're very passionate about, and that's come through in our conversation. Are you really, are you happy that Quantify is really changing that mindset, that the industry is now more receptive to it, and Quantify can say, great, you've got it, we'll go on this journey together. And believe it or not, it isn't actually painful, it's fun, and it's revelatory as well, because we're learning something about the customers, and we're learning something about ourselves as companies, as clients.
Absolutely. So you hit it on the head that by we are seeing this trends industry wide. Every client and global insurer that we are talking to and supporting, they are all leveraging these technologies. But I didn't hit one point, and this is a good moment for me to highlight that, is the organizational change. So what happens in these large insurance companies, which are legacy and long organizations which have been around for a very long time, there's an element of organizational change. So when you introduce this automation, you need to make sure that people and processes are also well understood. People are adopting those change, leveraging these technologies, and end-to-end processes in those companies are also well understood. And the standard operating procedures and manuals and claims manuals in these situations have been updated to reflect those automations and digital strategies. So the organizational change is a very important angle that we want to always highlight in cases of digital transformation of this nature for the organizations.
Absolutely. I'm glad you repeated this as well, because it was one of those themes which has cropped up in the discussion that we've had in the previous summit. So thank you so much for that. And in fact, Vikash, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And it's been fascinating how you've shown how technology, it can work so well within companies and it doesn't alienate customers. You bring that customer on board. It's everything that's happening in the background. It's not just AI, it's what's happening with the drones, everything. It's so all encompassing. And I have to confess that if I was a fraudster, which I'm not, I would be very, very worried, because it seems that you've rumbled the scams over the next 12 months. So then it becomes a game of cat and mouse, but I'm sure that you're ready for the challenge.
We indeed are. We are always here to support our customers in any way, shape, or form we can. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel here, Juliet. But this digital technologies, the revolution that we have seen now, and the resilience of the industry that we have seen now is going to prevail ultimately. And we are going to continue to see these acceleration and adoption of technologies. It's my absolute pleasure, it has been to be on with you here, sharing my experiences, what we are seeing in the industry, and learn from you all about what you are seeing. So I'm delighted here, and thank you for having me, Juliet.
Well, thank you for accepting our invitation and taking the time out of your very busy schedule to tell us what is going on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I'm sure we'll get the chance to meet again in the not too distant future. But that was Vikash Sachdeva, who's the Global Head of Advisory Services, FSI, at Quantify. Thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Somebody else who's been listening in to that discussion is Patrick Quigley. He's our pundit for the day. He's also the Executive Vice President and General Manager for International Partnerships and Expansion at Nearmap. Patrick, it's good to see you again. So much in that conversation, actually really exciting. So what was your take?
Yeah, it was very exciting. And you're starting to see some themes come out of the sessions this morning. What I really picked up on was the great explanation of the transformation and the digitization we find ourselves in. He started with that great quote by Microsoft saying, the innovation we saw during last year, would have taken 2 years to realize, because of the push to people accepting remote working, et cetera, et cetera. He moved from that into something that we see here at Nearmap also, which is really a mindset change. And that mindset change is going from this idea of this repair and replace to more of a prepare, predict, and prevent. And that's by leveraging technology and AI and updated real-time imagery. All of those things were kind of weaved through his story. And I couldn't agree more that that is a big part of the transformation and digitization that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, he put in some statistics as well, and I found that one really fascinating. About 70% of claims can be automated. So that means you've got 30% of those claims where you can actually focus to actually produce more quality. And I mean, it simply said to me that 70% of claims are just dealt with so quickly before this technology. It would have seemed unfeasible so many years ago, but it's
amazing.
Just like it is. It's a bit like breathing air, really. You don't think about it. But the point that I'm getting at is that whenever you talk about companies embracing technology, once upon a time, you would have had the chief financial officer saying, well, that's all very well and good, but it's going to cost money. And what Vikash did was that he was saying, look, if you embrace it, it achieves so much. And at the end of the day, the costs kind of cancel themselves out, because what you get at the end of it is so much better. You can't really put a cost on that.
No, you can. And it's really actually changing the relationships that we are having with the insured. One thing that popped into my mind as he was going through that in examples is, of course, last year we continued to see an unprecedented wildfire season out west. And he talked about this idea of prepare, predict, and prevent. Well, through the frequently captured imagery. So, for instance, Nearmap is flying over the top of 90 million residential and commercial properties up to 3 times a year in the US. That imagery not only can be used in terms of AI to find out, okay, what is the tree encroachment or the load in terms of if a fire were to spark out, what would happen to that property? But it also allows an interaction with that customer that may have not been possible before. So you may see that, hey, that tree is encroaching over the roof. It might be safer if you trim that back. Hey, you have a lot of debris, that is built up over the past year. It might be time to clean that up. All of that interaction, one, can make the home itself safer, but it's moving into that prevention and having a relationship with that customer, which really wasn't possible because of the advancement in technologies that we've seen, over the last years. We at Nearmap have been flying the US since 2014. So we have a rich archive of up to 18 shots, up to 3 times a year of those properties. So it's really like going into a time machine. So Vikas is really right in terms of how you're leveraging that along with AI to form a different relationship.
Absolutely. And again, within the basis of that relationship, the fact that we're talking about self-assessment, again, from my perspective as the outsider looking in, I've only ever known the relationship with insurance companies as being one of filling in forms or having people coming over to your place. But the idea that you can have this technology that cuts all of that out, that you can self-assess and have a very smooth real-time relationship with the insurance company, courtesy of all this technology.
Yeah, I actually like to think of it in terms of joint access, joint access of the property, because they can walk around and film different things on their property, but you can also point things out to them. So this metamorphosis that we're going through really all leads to the key points that he wrapped up with. That first notice of loss, speeding that up, getting the money into the bank accounts during those tough times, that is absolutely critical. The settlement of that claim. But then again, unfortunately, we do still face fraud in our industry. Being able to step in that time machine and go back and realize that, hey, you know what? There was roof damage before that hurricane came through, makes it a more palatable conversation in terms of making sure that you shake out the fraud. So in terms of how he really framed that up, I thought it was an excellent session and he really nailed it.
Yeah, and trust me, he's across the fraud. But look, Patrick, we're going to have to leave it there. Time, as ever, is our enemy. But if you want to hear more about the work that Quantify is doing, and it really is fascinating, make sure that you visit their hub.